So I think you're all here. We'll certainly talk about the whole issue of linking legacy to much of the older equipment that we have in the plant, what some of the differences are between IT and OT, and how those technical organizations are coming together, and what are some of the benefits of having IT-OT converged systems. You know, I think this is something that certainly this phenomenon has been going on for several years now. I think companies are all in a different level of progress as far as some that are completely converged, others that are kind of in the beginning stage of the process. But the problem is that you're still going to continuously have plants that are how do we live with the 30-year-old systems working with modern generation of IT systems, as well as even some modern generations of OT, and how is all this going to coexist in one world? Because I don't think anybody is in a position where they can do a full rip and replace of their factory to bring everything up to the speed where you can leverage all the latest technologies. So it's really kind of like just acknowledging the truth that you're going to have to be to live in this mixed domain, not only between IT and OT, but also the multiple generations of systems that you have. Let's see if our clicker works now. All right. I think that in many cases it's the difference in the domains from life cycle of the equipment. Sometimes, we sometimes say comparing, let's say, to people years to dog years, if a 4-year-old dog is equivalent to a 28-year-old human, a 4-year-old piece of equipment in IT is equivalent to about a 28-year-old piece of equipment on the factory floor as far as where it is in its life cycle. So the thing is that we're completely changing. When you go through the whole IT-OT convergence at the plant, it's also trying to get used to the fact that why is something that's 20-year-old, 25 years old still in use when every 2 or 3 years in IT I'm upgrading my equipment, and just trying to get used to that different type of mentality. So, how do you take advantage of the latest in machine learning and artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, and now connect that together to the factory floor in a way where everybody is collaborating? So you're taking that data from the factory floor and actually being able to leveraging all the latest analytics and being able to make much better business decisions by being able to take advantage of the artificial intelligence and the machine learning and everything that brings with it. But without IT-OT convergence, you're really not going to be able to do that. One thing we find very interesting is when we look at some of the available jobs now in IT and OT, it's becoming more of a case where sometimes in some plants we see, even in OT, where the data scientist jobs and data analyst jobs are some of the most prevalent of what we see being offered even within the factories. And if we were to say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, would that have ever been the case? People would have kind of looked at us funny to say, why would you hire that type of skill domain within the plant? But the data scientists and data analyst positions are pretty much exploding, and it's really being amplified as many of the baby boomers are retiring, and you're hiring millennials to backfill some of those jobs. So you're bringing in a completely different skill set within the plant, which drives the need for other technologies that leverage IT-OT convergence, like augmented reality and virtual reality. But as you see, sometimes what we see that may be different from the needs of IT and OT, but there's a lot of areas where there are overlap. And obviously the number one issue at every plant globally is cybersecurity. And in many cases, the cybersecurity expertise that you had from IT is now being applied in OT, and I think the OT is really benefiting a lot, from having that level of expertise and attention that maybe at one time OT didn't have with cybersecurity. At the same time, IT is learning the words real time and realizing that things have to be measured sometimes in milliseconds or microseconds, and that it must run 24/7, 365, and an unscheduled downtime is something that cannot be ever tolerated. So it's interesting to see as these things begin to come together. And just the difference in even the types of of environments. Many cases in OT, you had people who had been in those roles for 20, 25, or 30 years. Usually you had shorter job cycles in IT of people who may have been younger, but also had those positions for a shorter period of time. So you didn't have quite that legacy experience in IT that maybe you had in OT. And in many cases in OT, the database was sometimes up here and never recorded anywhere else. And sometimes, how do you prevent when do the appropriate knowledge capture when that person with that experience leaves the plant, and how do you keep that knowledge once that person does retire? But what are some of the benefits you can see is now once we see in results of IoT convergence, and you'll see that from many of the speakers here today, and just seeing the fact of how you've reduced process variability and how product quality has gone up, and the whole issue of being able to monitor your assets better and do better asset performance management has helped. Lower problem of negative incidents that sometimes can cause hazards and safety issues just by the fact that now you're able to gather this information and take preventative action before it happens, and the ability to collect all this data and historicize this data and being able to now do artificial learning and artificial intelligence and machine learning and be in a position where you can leverage all those terabytes and terabytes of data and help make decisions based on that history. But ultimately, it's how do we take that chart recorder, which still exists in many plants that we certainly make our way into, and how do we combine the chart recorder along with AI and virtual reality and augmented reality? So how do we take advantage of the latest in technologies but accept the reality that we are going to have to deal with that mixed legacy of product? So ultimately, it's how are we maximizing the value of our assets using IoT convergence? Are we able to attract a more modern workforce that might be more interesting in manufacturing just based on the fact that they can leverage a lot of the latest technologies today? Is this something that's also going to help us be more responsive to customers, because now we're able to make changes and react faster to changing customer and market demand? And this is really, you can't have a digital transformation process if you have not really mastered the IoT convergence. And I think you're going to hear a lot of that from our speakers. I'm going to introduce Ryan Sullivan, who's going to come up first and present his case. And then, only because of the number of speakers, we're just going to go speaker after speaker after speaker, and then finish up with the last 20, 25 minutes with a panel. But Ryan, come on up.